and welcome to Business Success in a Virtual World podcast, a resource of information for businesses to understand and embrace the innovative power of XR, VR, and AR. Each episode, we attempt to summarize what's new in this growing industry and highlight actual case studies of how these technologies are advancing success in business and enterprise. I'm Tim Beharon, Chairman of Creative Strategies, and each episode I'm joined by Barton Goldenberg, President of ISM Inc. Together, we help our listeners navigate the ever-growing mountain of information and technologies impacting virtual worlds, the metaverse, augmented reality, spatial computing, etc. In addition to all the information presented in each episode, additional information can be found on our resource website, in which you'll discover news, products, and most significantly, over 175 actual case studies of businesses utilizing these inventive technologies. That website is found at www.ismguide.com. The XR Metaverse resource link is on that site. There you'll discover field service examples, training, customer service, manufacturing, and much, much more. It's a fast-growing and complex area destined to impact your business. Let us help you figure out the best strategies. Now, on to the next episode. So, Barton, who are we going to profile this time in our podcast for VR and business success in a virtual world?
Thanks, Tim. Tonight, this session is about a great company called Pfizer, which, as you know, is an American multinational pharmaceutical and biotechnology corporation. It's headquartered in New York City. The company was established 147 years ago in 1849 in Brooklyn, New York, by two German entrepreneurs, Charles Pfizer and his cousin, Charles Erhardt. Pfizer's revenues in 2022 were $100 billion, making it the largest pharmaceutical company in the world. In 2022, Pfizer had 83,000 employees. What propelled Pfizer to hit the $100 billion sales revenue figure last year was the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. So in 2022, of the 100 billion, Pfizer generated 38 billion, or 38%, from their COVID vaccine. And of the 100 billion in sales last year, they generated an additional 19 billion, or 19%, for the antiviral pill Paxlovid. You add those two numbers up and you're at 58% of the total amount, of 57% of the total amount of their revenues was generated from COVID-related products. So it's really an amazing story. In addition to the COVID-19 vaccines and their antiviral pill Paxlovid, Pfizer also manufactures many well-known medicines that we all use regularly, including, for example, Advil, which is the #1 best-selling branded over-the-counter analgesic in the world. They also are manufacturing Bextra, Celebrex, Duflucan, Lyrica, Robitussin, and Viagra. Pfizer is also the mastermind behind many popular consumer products, including chapstick and Preparation H. Now, Pfizer's XR, VR, AR journey starts back in 2018 when they began to brainstorm ways to utilize XR technologies. With 39 manufacturing sites worldwide, there's always a need for onboarding and upskilling Pfizer employees. And remember, there's 83,000 employees worldwide. The need for onboarding and upskilling new employees has always been high, but in a company spread across 125 countries, finding an effective and efficient training program proved very difficult back in 2018. After much consideration, Pfizer decided that virtual reality training was the most logical first step in adopting XR. And Pfizer implemented two important phases in this VR, AR, XR journey. The first phase they called a proof of concept. And I think this is worth listening to, particularly for a large company. So the first couple of years became Pfizer's proof of concept phase, during which time they tested VR headsets, software, and they experimented with 3D scanning. They also began a large internal communication campaign whereby they shared with stakeholders throughout Pfizer information about training use cases, VR training benefits, and other VR insights and knowledge. This proof of concept phase was all about giving stakeholders a vision of what immersive technology could do. I call it the art of the possible, with the goal to generate interest from different organizations within Pfizer. So the big message here is they took the time for an internal communication campaign to get everybody on board in a way that got people excited, and had different divisions come in and say, can I get involved? So I thought that was very interesting. Phase 2 kicks in December 2019, when, as all of us know, a cluster of patients in China's Hubei province experienced a pneumonia-like illness that did not respond well to standard treatments. And within 90 days, if we remember this, like March of 2020, health authorities have reported more than 120,000 cases of this new virus across already 114 countries. And then 6 days after WHO declared the COVID-19 a global pandemic in the spring of 2020, Pfizer and German-based BioNTech announced their intent to co-develop a potential vaccine based on the new mRNA technology that was developed at the University of Pennsylvania. And as a U of P alumni, I am proud to note that the two lead scientists that pioneered the whole mRNA research just won 2023 Nobel Prizes in medicine. But anyhow, in early 2020, little was known about the COVID-19 virus. One thing that was apparent was that millions of people would need a vaccine, which meant Pfizer needed to train thousands of new manufacturing workers quickly within Pfizer's manufacturing facilities. The challenge is, how could Pfizer get so many new workers trained? The team at Pfizer had already proven that VR training was a powerful tool over the 2018 to 2020 period, but now Pfizer had to scale VR training in an unprecedented way. Over the ensuing months, Pfizer literally hired thousands of manufacturing workers and trained them using VR technology. Think about that. Had the manufacturers, the employees and manufacturing workers not been trained quickly and easily, we wouldn't have come out with the vaccine as it did in the rollout such an impressive short period of time. Whereas a new manufacturing floor worker might take about a year to become fully operational using traditional training methods, the highly contagious COVID-19 virus magnified the limitations of the traditional training. And conversely, what VR training thrives in is when it's a situation that's difficult or dangerous and you don't have to physically be there, but can be easily scalable. And so what Pfizer did is they created an immersive VR simulations of real world scenarios without putting people in danger. They use 3D replicas, they use virtual group training, they use real-time feedback to ensure outstanding training outcomes. And in fact, the results were astounding. By the time the brilliant Pfizer and BioNTech had developed the vaccine in a 9-month period of time, Pfizer's manufacturing team were ready to begin production, and so too were the thousands of contracted manufacturing workers that Pfizer had trained using this VR technology. More precisely, the VR manufacturing training transformed 100+ pages of standard operating procedures into interactive training experiences that collapse the time and minimize the space required for on-the-job training. So it's just a tremendous way to shorten and to improve the retention of that type of training. VR behavioral training trained users on proper behavior and movement using speed and haptic trainings on the manufacturing floor. And VR environment training removed accessibility issues by taking 3D scans or 3D replicas. Of importance, VD training leads at Pfizer reported a 40% reduction in the total time trained and a 3x increase in quality, both of the training and what was done on the manufacturing floor. And I'll come back to this in just a moment. Over the next year, Pfizer and BioNTech accomplished their goal of manufacturing millions of vaccines. For the first time since the beginning of the pandemic, there was a spark of hope for all of us across the globe. The contract manufacturing workers trained in VR were a massive part of that spark, and the COVID-19 pandemic put Pfizer's immersive training program to the ultimate test, which turned out to be hugely successful. Now, while Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine story is an incredible testimony to the power of VR training, I do want to talk about two additional VR applications that Pfizer is pursuing as a part of what I consider to be their leadership in both VR and XR technology. And so let me talk about two additional ways that Pfizer is now currently leveraging XR technology. The first way is they leverage VR to help build their innovative new sterile injectable plant, and that's located in Kalamazoo. So creating an entirely new pharmaceutical factory is both expensive and time-consuming. It's led many companies, including Pfizer, to turn to XR technology to create what's called virtual factories. In Pfizer's case, they're creating a $450 million sterile injectable factory, a virtual factory, that harnesses what I've talked to, and Tim and I have talked to in prior podcasts. I just remember the Siemens one and the BMW podcast, that harnesses digital twin technology to optimize the factory and its supply chain, as well as train employees in a more efficient way. Like human twins, the digital twin is an exact replica of a physical object or location, except it's entirely an immersive virtual world. A virtual factory floor, for example, will allow the company to follow an entire supply chain process in order to find ways to optimize and cut costs. This gets all done virtually, which slashes costs significantly. Companies also use digital twins to model new machines or robots. It allows engineers to find weakness in the design or movement and fix them before they actually create the end product or open up the real factory. In its leadership role, in addition to using VR since 2018 to train its employees, as we see, Pfizer is now leading the way in the development of digital twin technology to optimize its induction into the health services industry. On a second, just a little bit more about this, someone. So I mentioned they're building this $450 million, they call it a molecular aseptic processing factory on the Kalamazoo County, Michigan location. Now, it's 420,000 square feet, which is quite big. And the giant factory will focus on making these sterile injectables. They predict, now listen to this carefully, that the building will create 450 jobs. But not all workers will be required to be on site, because thanks to the molecular aseptic processing digital twin, factory workers can now learn how to do their entire jobs without ever stepping inside the factory. Using VR headsets, these employees can tour the new factory, learn the new tasks before the actual factory is built, and then literally walk into the factory and begin to do their work. Trainees can now observe how the trainers can now observe how trainees are executing their tasks in a virtual environment. They give them feedback. And because of much of this new factory and machines will be using 3D models, these models can easily move into a VR software for employee training. So it's a really clean move across. Having the employees professionally trained early on is essential to boosting Pfizer's efficiency, as producing sterile injectables is a long and complicated process, and the digital twin technology will give the company the competitive advantage that it's seeking. All right, let me give you just a short second one, where Pfizer's embracing VR simulations to improve something we might not normally talk about, and that is protocol compliance. So in the highly regulated pharmaceutical industry, protocol compliance is critical. You got to follow it, and very carefully. Pfizer is bringing in VR simulations to investigate sites to improve compliance with clinical trial protocols, including the way study drugs get compounded. This maturing technology, which has only been in the market a couple of years, can be used both to help prepare an investigation product, as well as train clinical trial investigators on complex study protocols. And the intention Pfizer has is to apply the protocol compliance technology across multiple sites, since it's a great option for what is referred to as phase 2 and phase 3 training in compliance. So there's just another example, of Pfizer in action. Let me close by making a couple of comments. Bringing a drug to market can feel like searching for a needle in a haystack. The failure rate is steep, with only 1 in every 5,000 drugs screened that actually eventually get approved. 1 out of 5,000. Moreover, it's a long, winding road to market, with the drug development process taking on average, listen carefully, 12 years and costing upwards to $2.6 billion, which makes development of the COVID-19 vaccine in 9 months a truly incredible accomplishment. Even for the drugs that do get approved, manufacturing is not always straightforward. It's a very, very complex, highly regulated manufacturing environment. Process deviations, ineffective collaboration, training results get lost and create lost batches, delays, and resource waste. So that's another example of you can use the VR to help bring the drug through the various stages, to train the workers before they get to the factory, but then really making sure that the factory is run efficiently and effectively. Again, VR and XR can play a very important role, also using the digital twin. So as discussed in this case study, I call it technology pioneer. Pfizer is leveraging existing and new XR technology to shift this reality of searching for a needle in a haystack to come up with a new drug. Headsets equipped with VR help train employees quickly and cost effectively. XR technology also facilitates creating digital twin factories to optimize processes and costs, as well as manufacturing effectiveness. XR technology collaboration tools give researchers the on-the-spot feedback, better way to achieve process and compliance directives, and an ability troubleshooting issues in real time. My hat goes off, Tim, to Pfizer, a 174-year-old company, for their pioneering use of XR technology since 2018 in the healthcare industry.
As you share this particular case study, it strikes me that, number one, they were so ahead of the curve in the sense of understanding the role of something like VR and XR could do for their training process, but also as a part of integrating it into their discovery aspect. Yes, it's very impressive that they were able to get this thing through in 9 months and have that vaccine ready. But it's interesting in this particular case. Here's a company that is over 130, 40 years old.
174 years old.
Yeah, 174 years old, and are still innovating and thinking ahead. Now, granted, part of their business model has to think ahead, but the fact that they're zeroing in on advancing the process as they move ahead, and in this particular case with training. And if you actually think through the many of the case studies we've shared over the last year, many of them put training as one of the more important aspects of it. And as you've been doing this analysis and looking at these various case studies, it does appear that the number one thing that pops up that is understandable by other companies is training. And this is revolutionary, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you make a couple of very important points. One, that Pfizer, $100 billion company, should have been in this business of VR and XR since 2018, tells you that every company that wants to survive in the future, every company that wants to remain competitive in the future, must be looking at this today and come up with a plan of action, and then put your toes in the water and find out how it can work. And remember, there was a 3-year initial, what they called a proof of concept phase from 2017 or 18 to 2020-ish. They got cut a little bit short by the COVID-19 effort, but it's just an example of how forward-thinking companies are using XR, VR, AR technology today. They're not talking about tomorrow. They're using it today to help with something very important, and they're learning from their experience and going into other areas. That's one thing I think is important. The training is, for me, pretty much a slam dunk. When you can save 40 to 100% of the time it takes you to train, so go from months to weeks, or weeks to days, or days to hours. And you can have a 75% retention rate, 75% higher than a traditional training. Then, and it's very cost effective, because once you get the initial virtual reality training locked, then it's scalable through headsets. It becomes just the future way of doing business. And as you said in many of the podcasts that we've done, all these companies are doing VR, AR, XR technology today. Many are using some of the things I talked about, whether it's VR training or digital twin technology. But this is all happening today, and it's always where the title of this podcast is a business success in a virtual world. That success is happening today, and if you're not a part of that success, I really would strongly encourage you to get involved, put stakes in the ground. Tim and I would be delighted to help you, but now is the time to get involved, because your competitors are not sitting back and waiting for you to get involved. I promise you.
Yeah, I think that's the other issue here, the competitive position that they can take using this technology. The other thing that really kind of is fascinating to me, if they started in 2018, they were using relatively early VR technology. Can you imagine what they may be eventually to be able to do with Apple's Vision Pro headset, where the visualization in that is so much even more realistic? Would allow them to and probably advance what they're doing in building new factories and product lines. And then you mentioned one other thing that's really important is, in this particular case, and all of the cases, I guess, is being able to help the FDA walk through the process of how they did it, what they did, its properties, things that it can do, etc. And it's kind of funny, but training the FDA as a part of the process would speed the process up too of getting these drugs to market faster.
And it's documented, it's digitally documented, so the FDA can go back and everybody has the chance. And really, it's an interactive learning, can be very effective. You can ask lots of questions. I do want to just make my final comment on the Vision Pro. What you're alluding to, and you've written extensively on it, and I think we even did one whole podcast just on the Vision Pro. I would encourage our listeners to listen to it. But with 12 cameras and a 3D camera, what it's going to do is revolutionize the way we can go inside a factory and look at a machine, or revolutionize the way we're going to interact with a patient, or millions of different ways to literally look at the world differently. And so I think your point is so spot on. I'm so excited about what I think could be a Q1 2024 Apple Vision Pro launch.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how companies that's already using this technology are going to use next generation technology in the future. Well, Barton, thank you again for sharing this fascinating case study on Pfizer. And for those of you who joined us, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to continuing our discussion with you. For more information on this and other case studies, please check out the website www.ismguide.com and click the link for XR Metaverse Resource Center. We look forward to you joining us next time on another episode of Business Success in a Virtual World.